Welcome to the Sales Career Podcast. This is your host, Kevin Hopp. Whether you're an executive, sales leader, or just getting your career in sales started, I'm here to help you read between the lines and hear the real stories that you can't get from a resume or from a LinkedIn profile, all designed to help you shape your own sales career. Let's dive right into today's episode and see what we can learn. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Sales Career Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Hopp. My guest today has a really interesting background as working in formal consulting with companies like Booz Allen and FGMC, but ended up in the startup world where he's now been at the same tech startup that's beginning to really take off for about 15 years. And I can't wait to hear that story. He is a senior sales executive at this point. Please, everybody, welcome the great and powerful Todd Eastman.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for having me. I'm definitely a big fan of the podcast. I watch a bunch of them on LinkedIn. So really appreciate you having me here.
Totally. Well, I think your story that people can see from the outside looking in looks really interesting because you don't see startup leaders in sales positions very often that come from a consulting background. So, why don't we start there? You didn't have this the typical rise of, I was a sales rep from here to here, and then I was a senior sales rep, and then I was a sales manager, and then I was a district manager, and then I was a regional VP, and now I'm the VP of Biz Dev. That doesn't seem to be your arc. How did you get into sales here, and then maybe we talk about the early days of getting into Logikcull when you made the transition from consulting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an interesting story. I mean, I think everybody likes to think they're interesting. I don't know if mine is super interesting, but I grew up with a father in sales. He was in real estate and then mortgage banking, and that always I think that's where my passion for sales was rooted. I used to go to his seminars, and he would speak, and he would always be talking to people in elevators and everywhere we went. It seemed like he was making friends. So I formed a passion for that pretty early on. When I went to college, I picked the major that paid the most, to be completely honest. And I went to Virginia Tech, and it was called Management Science back then, which was a horrible name. They renamed it to Business Information Technology, which made a little more sense. But essentially, it groomed you to go out there. You got a nice mix of business and computer science. And it groomed you to go out there and essentially consult for XYZ different company and help them with their business/technology needs. So I kind of came out of college and went right on that path. It was right when the .com bubble burst. So a lot of my fellow colleagues kind of had their offers rescinded. I was thinking I was going to do some awesome high-end consulting for, some big, publicly traded corporate company. That all got turned on its head. And the company that I joined right out of college called AMS said, hey, we'll still keep you, but instead you're going to do government consulting. And I was like, okay, it's a good paying job. I figured, why not? Dove into that, did that for a couple years, then moved over to Booz Allen, worked with the DOJ. It was great foundational career learnings. But there was one day where I literally took my salary and I made a spreadsheet and I pulled it to the right with inflation. And I was like, this is depressing. I need to be in a role where I can control my own destiny. And that was kind of sales, always kind of pecking in the background. So around that time, our co-founder, Andy Wilson, had started Logic in 2004. We were friends from high school and college. And, he kind of poked me and said, hey, would it make sense to come over here? We're doing some neat things. This was right when he started, by the way, with his co-founder. I'd bought a house out of college. I just had my first child. I said, there was no way I'm coming to work with two guys and a dog in a big office. Fast forward to about 2007, he had kind of kept at it. And at that point, the company was, having pretty good success for, 5-6 person company. So I figured, what, have a kid, have a house. What better time to throw caution to the wind and dive headfirst into sales?
Take a big risk.
That was my first foray. I remember I called my cousin down in Florida who was a paralegal. And I was like, I'm about to take a sales job in the legal industry. What advice can you give me? And she's like, I don't know if I'd do that. So that was kind of the, leading up to, essentially getting to Logic.
Interesting. Because, okay, so if I heard that story correctly, you got invited to join when it was really small. and you said, I can't jump from a comfortable base salary, consistent working environment into that like startup, but you eventually did make the jump. And what's really crazy, which is really unusual, right? Like and my listeners can probably attest to this. You don't see people that have been at a startup for 15 years. But like, let's talk about the fact that most startups that exit aren't even around for 15 years, 10
Yep.
years, whatever it is, right? It's funny, like a lot of the companies that I end up working with and for are all, less than 5-year-old companies, less than 3-year-old companies.
Right.
Two of my clients right now are like kind of brand new companies within the last year and a half. And my dad and I joke about that because my dad has been working at his job longer than Google has been a company.
Wow.
So it's interesting to see that there is a way to do it and ride the startup wave, I guess. So talk to me about that. How come you're still at the same company 15 years later?
That's a great question. So when I joined Logic, we were a service-based customer. So, for those that don't know what we do, we're an e-discovery company. So when people get into trouble, they need to find out what's going on within the data, they would come to us. So when I joined, the company at the time had built their own proprietary software, and they were doing a lot of work for other vendors in our space. The problem was they weren't getting a lot of notoriety. They were really getting none. We were kind of the man behind the curtain. And so when I joined, really as the first official salesperson, the charter was, go out there, go to these law firms, go to these corporations, and sell them directly. Get them engaged with us directly versus being kind of a backup to a vendor. And so we did that very successfully. I joined in 2007. In 2008, we made the Inc. 500 as one of the fastest growing companies, and this is just e-discovery services. And so it's really great. The problem with selling services that at least I found is it became a commodity. And what I mean by that is it kind of boiled down to, who you took out to lunch, who you took out to dinner, who you took to a sports game would give you their next project. And while there's good money there, I didn't feel very fulfilled professionally. Like it didn't feel as much of a challenge. So I was starting to getting, I was getting to the point where I was getting a little like, all right, like what do I do now? Like what's next? And the company itself kind of had the same feeling. And we have a really interesting story. So the company essentially made a decision to disrupt ourselves. We were a service that you could call up, send your data to, we do our thing, send it back. We kind of said, what if we cut out ourselves and build a product that lives on the web that you can just log into, drag and drop in your data. It's all automated and it's as easy as using the internet, like using Amazon or Google. We teased that around for a while, couple years, and then we made a decision in around 2011 that we were going to go for it, and we built our product. So while we were building our product, we were running a successful services business. We kind of slowly started to shut that down and then shift as we started to really focus on our new SaaS-based offering. Very turbulent time. It's very hard to do that. I don't recommend it.
Yeah.
A lot of late nights, a lot of lost sleep, a lot of stress, and we actually had to fire a lot of customers. We had to say, hey, we've been there for you for 5, 6, 7 years, and we're not going to be doing this stuff anymore. In 2012, we released in private beta, and we did that for a year. To really kind of get the bugs out and really see if people were interested in solving a real business need. And then on April Fool's Day in 2013, we released it to the wild.
What a day!
We have a good sense of humor here, so that was the official day, and so it was off to the races from there, and we completely shut down our services-based business.
Interesting.
So when people say, "Wow, 15 years is a long time," to me, it's kind of like 7, 8 years at one company, and then, the current 7, 8 years at the same company doing something totally different. We didn't know the first thing about SaaS. I mean, we literally feet to the fire, learned on the job, and it was a ton of fun. Again, you see bags under my eyes. This is a scar tissue, but from a learning standpoint, I wouldn't give it up for anything.
Right on, right on. So it seems like what I like about that story is that you guys had the customer journey in mind, right? Like you saw the business challenge. That's where the first company was formed. Like e-discovery is a thing. but then you evolved how you serve that customer. And I'm sure it's done a lot for, the books, right? Like, and I talk about this on this podcast constantly, the idea that software is eating the world, and software sales is such a great job. I mean, I just saw a post on LinkedIn today of a guy who has 3 years of sales experience, software sales experience. He just got a job that's 160K base.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
name another sales field where you can go do that in 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, it's a strong market. I mean, and yeah, to your earlier point, I didn't have, that what you see today, kind of SDR, BDR, inside sales rep, junior AE, AE, manager, district manager, regional manager.
Yeah.
We kind of didn't really even know what we were doing. I mean, we didn't have SDRs or BDRs for a long time. And we were out there, myself, our CEO, our CTO, his co-founder, we were out there knocking on doors and saying, hey, would this make sense? But I think it's interesting for us because we really did see a lot of the challenges and inefficiencies in our own process. And that's really what gave us the idea for this product was, we can eliminate a lot of this frustration for us and for the customer out there and essentially replace, the human element in the process. And so it was really exciting that we were able to do that.
I love that. So even if it is two different companies, that's 15 years. Like, so I guess like one of my first questions here, which wraps into another question, is how many other people besides the founders have been there for 15 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first and foremost, the culture at the company is incredible. Andy and Shen, the two founders, have, I think, really cultivated a pretty amazing environment. I consider it a family. Even when we bring on new customers, I say, welcome to the Logikcull family. There is something called a 10-year club. And so there's a heavy recognition, we recognize people that have been with the company, for a year, 2 years, but there's a 10-year club. I think we're pushing, I should have looked this up. I think we're pushing 7 or 8 people. I mean, we have a pretty impressive number of folks that have been here from the very early days. Like after I started, we brought on 2 people from one of our customers. That didn't make the customer very happy, but it was a consultancy that we were working with. And now they're, one kind of leads our infrastructure and one does like everything, on the engineering side. And they've been here for, almost 14 years each. So,
wow.
So yeah, I'd say it's at least 7. It might be even more than that.
I mean, that's rare. That in itself is rare. The other question, the other piece of that is, so you've had some coworkers for a really long time. What's the like, if you had to give advice to someone who's looking at, wow, this guy's been at the same company for 15 years. He made this move because he wanted to make more money and be in charge of how much money he could make. Like, you've obviously probably been doing well for 15 years. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there. So what would the advice be to, like, how would someone think about, how do I find a job that's steady? Like, what did you look for, and what have been the things that have made the difference as to, hey, I'm not leaving. Like, I'm here for the long haul, so to speak.
Yeah, well, two parts to the question. So, as far as like, just taking the risk, just don't settle. I again, like, I can't remember vividly where I was this day, but I was bored. I was waiting for something from our DOJ customer. And again, I did that spreadsheet exercise and it was just like, man, is this it? And not to knock that. I mean, there's a lot of risk mitigation in people that have a non-sales career and they know that they're going to, kind of go like this, and that's totally fine. For me, it wasn't. And I'm just glad I did it when I did it and I didn't wait. So, the advice there is like, if you have just an inkling, just go for it. If the first sales job doesn't work out, there's plenty of sales jobs out there. A lot of people think sales are scary too, but you start selling, from like infancy. I mean, you're selling your parents to buy you stuff. Everybody, inherently has like pretty good sales skills. But, to be able to use them and use them in the business world is obviously a little bit different. So that's kind of my advice there. As far as the company itself, again, it's a unique journey. I don't know how many people will find kind of a company that then kind of reinvents itself. I look obviously for culture and the people that I'm in the trenches with. We make mistakes. We're human. We're going to mess up. Is that supporting cast going to pick you up and be supportive and help you learn from your mistakes? Because especially with what we did, there's a lot of mistakes that were made. and that's the way you learn, right? You iterate. So yeah, you got to make sure you're with a good group that it really embraces that. Um, I'm big on growth. I didn't know the first thing about really traditionally selling services when I joined, so I was really excited about learning. And then as I started to get a little kind of stagnant and was over selling services, we built a SaaS offering, and I was really excited to kind of learn that. Again, I didn't even know what SaaS meant when we started doing it. So it's kind of a real life MBA in business, which is so great, and we keep learning. We bring on new AEs that have come from different markets, different industries, and I'm always eager to learn. I don't think you can ever stop being, hungry and curious for knowledge.
Sure.
Don't have that ego. Just kind of like, what can I learn from anyone, junior, senior, a peer. And we really cultivate a good environment there where I think people really embrace that. So those are, just a couple things that I find, really important that, are big values for me to be at and stay at a company.
And that's rare, right? Like I know a lot of people. I got a lot of connections. I've spoken to some really cool leaders here on the podcast too. But to have that mindset of it's okay to make mistakes, and that kind of like patience around the idea that, hey, we're trying to help people grow, like that's really rare. And if I'm listening to this, like, and I'm looking for a job, my eyebrows are going up. Like it's a rare mindset. So wow. So talk to me a little bit about, currently your title's VP of Biz Dev and Sales Strategy. Like, how tactical are you still, like, in the field and like closing deals, or do you guys have like a big structure at Logikcull where you're more in like management purely? I'm just curious.
So, yeah, no, it's great. It's a good question. We're pretty flat. We brought on a CRO, about a year and a half ago because we've seen really really great growth, and we needed to really get the engine rolling. My title's a little wonky because I've been here so long and I've kind of done everything.
Yeah.
My main charter is to, so I've been, I was fortunate to be able to sell, Logikcull number 1 and 2 and 5 and 10. So I have a fairly decent sized book of business. And so the biggest part of my charter is obviously keeping all those folks happy. There's some of our largest customers out there, and even if they're not large in size, some of our first couple are the most near and dear to our heart. So we want to take good care of them. I do have a charter to go out and bring in, net new business. And then probably the area that I've pushed on the most is just from a growth standpoint, helping, mentoring, leading others, and imparting that wisdom, and then seeing their success. When you're early in your sales career, you want to do well, you want to hit your numbers. Once you've done that enough, I think you want to start helping people grow and then seeing the results of that. And that's kind of the stage we're at now, as we've really built out a team. The thing that I get the most excited about is getting into or collaborating on somebody with a deal, and then seeing them win that and them get the accolades and knowing that you helped. That's just awesome. I do think that aspect of our company might be slightly unique. I know that I've heard, sales teams and groups can be, pretty competitive. We've really formed a pretty solid bond where it's kind of like one big team. Everybody's naturally competitive and wants to do well, but you see a lot of people really, really pushing and rooting each other on, and that's all back to the culture that the company has cultivated. So
I love that. Cultivated. Get it? Logikcull.
I like it. It's a T-shirt.
Well,
See, we got the swag.
that's right. The branding is on point. This is actually a conversation I've brought up a few times around, like the internal struggle in my career, where I've realized that the companies that I am associated with most of the time, since I work with very early stage tech companies that are almost all VC backed, their job is not to be a good employer. From what I've seen, right? Like I've come to that kind of meta take that, like, so you want to work with VC backed startups, like, they're not designed to be great employers. They're designed to create a ton of value. Like they're designed to go to the moon. And if they feel like an oar is pulling in the wrong direction, it's not. I've been that guy who's been cut from startups many times. Not for lack of trying. It's just, hey, we don't have time to fix what needs to be fixed here, or we don't have that growth mindset around people. We'd rather cut ties and figure out something else, because at the end of the day, the number one thing is MRR and ARR growth, right? Like there's like that ultimate thing. So it seems like for a San Francisco based tech company, Logikcull is doing things very differently.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the idea, right? I mean, there's a couple of those famous marketing books, Red Ocean, Blue Ocean, Purple Elephant. I mean, we try to stand out too. I was just on a call yesterday or the day before where, the prospect teed up something great. She's like, tell us more about you guys as a business. And I was like, this is a slam dunk. And actually, one of the things we're really proud of that I talk about a lot, that's a differentiator, is the type of company we are. We are a very well-run outfit. If you go to our Glassdoor reviews, people that have worked here, currently work here, or have left, they're really, really strong. And when you compare those to our competitors, I think we really stand out. And so, in the sales process, a lot of what we do is sell trust, right? And trust us, what we're saying. And so to me, that partnership's a big thing. Like you don't want the insides to be rotten. And so there's a very big mindset of the company to do that. Case in point, they pay almost 100% of healthcare. Like that's unheard of. Nice. And that's something that, that's a big attractor for a lot of people. But just like right out of the jump, like without even talking to anyone at the company, it's like, wow, they really care, about their people. And there's a ton of things like that, that I think that, little big things too. You can prop each other. If you do, something for me or go out of your way, I can kind of call you out with that. I mean, there's just a ton of that kind of stuff that they put in place. And I think the challenging times, trying to hit a quarter number or trying to roll out a big, new feature release, that's the stuff that you think about when you're staying up late at night, just really, pouring in that blood, sweat, and tears. So I think it's really smart on our co-founder and founder's part to do that. And it's a big missed opportunity for other companies. I mean, it's not super difficult to treat your people right and or even go out of your way. So.
But you have to have that goal, right? Like I think the thing that people don't realize is like working for a guy like what's his name, who founded Apple,
right?
Can't remember his name off the top of my head right now. But working for guys like that, working for Jeff Bezos, yeah, they got really, really, really rich, but people didn't really like working for them, right? They were kind of aggressive people that were pretty cutthroat to get to the top. And I don't know if I'm someone looking to make a career move, like I want to. Depends on what my goal is, of course, but finding quality employers should be on the top of your list, because there's a lot of jobs out there. The market is hot. Plenty.
Well, you just said it too. The LinkedIn post or the guy you talked to with the 160K. I mean, it's a bananas market out there. I mean, especially out. So we're technically not in San Francisco anymore. We went 100% remote during the pandemic, which was super cool.
Yeah.
So we shuttered our brick and mortar, and that big lease money just goes right back into the business, which is awesome. But even out there, we had people out there. I mean, the sales, the go-to-market folks especially were getting, picked off or attempted to be picked off left and right. I mean, you could close your eyes and spin in a circle and find 5 companies looking to hire an SDR or BDR for X percentage more than they were making. So you really do have to differentiate yourself. And I think it's important that companies, think more about that. And again, I don't think it's overly difficult. And the same goes for business. Like, business doesn't have to be fair, but there's a right way and a wrong way. I think you can run a good business, you can fight a good fight and do it all with integrity and ethics and still come out on top. You don't have to be cutthroat and, kind of cheat, lie, steal to win deals. And that's really a big thing for us. Like one of our company, values is to do the right thing. I mean, so we have a lot of alignment to that. So
love that. Well, Todd, it's been great. I want to start wrapping up here. So I ask every guest the same 3 questions. The first of which is, in your sales career so far, 15 years at the same company here, what's been the biggest commission check you ever got?
Well, so I think the number is less important, but more the style. So we closed a big deal. It was one of our largest deals to date with a large law firm. And the company, and this goes back to, kind of the culture, sent one of those golf checks. I have a picture of it somewhere. I mean, the thing was huge. Yeah. And I remember my wife's like, something's here for you. And I went downstairs, there's this giant check. I mean, it was like a real check. And I, of course, had to take a picture and send it back, to the folks that did it. So, yeah, I mean, sales, my sister just got into sales and she was asking me a lot of career advice. And I was like, look, you can make really good money. You can also not make a lot of money. It's really up to you. But I mean, I'm motivated. I have 3 kids. I have a family. I want to provide for them.
Mm-hmm.
So, my drive is more that I can do that. And it's really less about like the actual commission. I'm probably less of a true coin operated salesperson than most.
Well,
So anyway, I didn't answer your question, but I hope that's at least a good story.
Sure. I mean, that's a first. No one's told the story of getting a golf-sized check. Although some of the checks that we have heard about, the listeners know, deserve a golf-sized thing.
Well, hey, it's ideas for other leadership out there for when it happens. So
yeah. I mean, a few guests back, we had a 7-figure number come out as a commission check, and I was like, what? Holy
that's
wow.
I can say I've never gotten a 7-figure single check, so let's put it
wild.
That way.
Awesome. So the next question I ask everybody, so in the totality of your career, you've done a few different things, which is really interesting. What has been your favorite job?
Honestly, so and this is probably when I knew I was going to be destined for sales, was waiting tables in high school. Like there's just something great about giving somebody, good service and kind of getting that commission, right? Your tip. So, I worked at Outback Steakhouse. I'm in Northern Virginia, in Fairfax. Probably to this day, and I absolutely love Logikcull. It was like my favorite job. I mean, it was just something pure about it. You're out there, you're selling, you do a bad job. You don't, I mean, so that I should have known at that point I was going to end up in this capacity somehow.
I love that. It's actually pretty rare amongst people I've had on the podcast that they come from a service background like that. Lots of different backgrounds, but cool. So the final question I have for you is, imagine money wasn't a thing. You didn't have to work anymore. What would you do with your time?
Man, that's a tricky question. I mean, obviously I have kids, I have a family. But I traveling probably seems like that's what everybody says, but I mean, there's so much of the planet.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much not. So
yeah, there's so much of the planet. Yeah, there's so much of the planet I haven't seen. I think I would try to cover as much ground as possible. I mean, to me, that's how you learn. We took our kids on a 4,000-mile RV trip a couple years ago. We went from Virginia to Niagara Falls, ended up in Vegas. And, a lot of people are like, oh, you could have, gone out of the country. I'm like, why do that? Like, there's so much of this country that they haven't even seen. And it was just awesome. So I would probably do some kind of iteration of that with whoever would want to come along. And I'm not the strongest writer, but I would figure out a way to kind of blog about it and, tell people what I was seeing. So
I love that. It funny that you mentioned that. Like, it's not the most common answer, which is crazy because that would be part of my answer. Is like, I would really like to just travel a lot because I really enjoy new places.
What's the most common answer you hear?
Most common answer is like spend time with family, right?
Yeah.
Spend time with kids, and then hobbies. Like, people really like their hobbies, right? Like,
yeah.
I totally get that. Like, I would golf. Like, my retirement, I would love to retire early before I'm too old and crotchety to like really golf. But I'd really like to retire on a golf course and like golf every day. Have like a game every day. Like, that would be really cool.
That sounds pretty nice. I mean, I think, that's advice there too. Work is work. Family is very important, obviously. I think like, I try to have a pretty well-balanced approach. We're afforded now that a lot of us are remote. You can kind of stop after work, whereas you might be in, commute, do that family time and then pick up again, in the later hours. There's a recent article, I think Microsoft did a study that more people are working from like 8 to 10 than ever before, and they're getting that family time in. So I don't know if my family would want me around more than that. So that's why I'd be off traveling.
Love it. Well, Todd, the end of the podcast here is your opportunity to say, anything you want to say here. How do people connect with you? What's the most important thing that people can do?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any interest there, it's I'm on LinkedIn. Todd Eastman. It's pretty straightforward. The company, obviously Logikcull. If you have a ambition to get into sales or go to market, and we have a lot of job openings. And on the engineering side, I mean, we're really going fast right now, really rampant. So, product engineering. I mean, there's a lot of different things out there. So look us up. We're solving a really big business problem, and it's just an amazing place to work with amazing people. I don't know if I would get hired today, as kind of like one of the jokes I say. The level of talent we continue to bring in amazes me. So I'm glad I got in when I did.
Exciting. It does sound like a very exciting place to work and a quality employer, which is rare. A lot of employers out there, not a lot of them have a really quality story like that. Well, Todd, thanks for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
If this episode is interesting to you, please share your thoughts on LinkedIn or Twitter. Tag me, and I might just feature your post in an upcoming episode of the Sales Career Podcast. Or if you want to connect directly, go to hopconsultinggroup.com and we'll find a way to work together. Cheers.